amazing ideas of awakening and true self-discovery with you. And welcome to all joining us on Facebook and YouTube. Happy to have you in the space as well. My Lisa is there at home with our fur baby this morning, so glad she's tuning in remotely. So we have a lot to cover today in this idea of journeying. You know, this is one of the great motifs or images that we are given in the spiritual literature across the globe, this idea of we are on a journey, a pilgrimage, a search to find our true home or destination. And so we're going to explore this because what becomes increasingly clear as you progress on this journey is the beautiful way that A Course in Miracles says this, and many of you know it well. This is a journey without distance to a place that you've never left. So it is a paradoxical journey. It's a journey back to yourself. But we don't know this self, it seems, that we are currently in this far-off country, to use another journeying illusion, that we are the prodigal that left ourself and have gone into a far country to be another self. And it's this other self that doesn't feel at home, doesn't feel satisfied, which is actually what the Buddha said this life is all about. Life is dissatisfactory as long as you're believing you're this other self living in a far-off country. And so this is where we begin the journey, and it's really great to get your orientation before you set out on the path, that you're setting out on the path because there's something vitally missing at the core of your being if you're paying attention. Now, you could be blissfully ignorant for a little while and indulge yourself in the events and things of the world, indulge the senses, get lost in distractions and games and dramas. And that might go on for a little while. It might go on for lifetimes if you buy into that belief. But eventually you come back to this, again, what A Course in Miracles would call a pain threshold. That we get to a place within ourselves where we just can't go on living an artificial life. That something in us is yearning for authenticity, for true connection, for true peace, a lasting sense of safety and security that can't be found in the phenomena of the external world. And so this journey without distance, as paradoxical as it may seem, is where we find ourselves this morning. And it requires of us something that might seem a bit taxing at first. It requires us to actually deeply look into ourselves, really get clear and honest with who we are and where we are, right? This idea of orientation. And then when we realize we've been in this far country, the lights come on. And you have an aha moment. Pause for a drink. Just don't make me sing. So we have some companions on this journey this morning. We're going to be traveling with the beloved Rumi. We're also going to be bringing in our friends Sri Aurobindo and Mira Alfassa, also known as the Mother, and also, of course, the teachings from A Course in Miracles. So what we're going to do is we're going to explore some major ideas that I think are vital to understanding the journey. And wherever you find yourself, whatever tradition or belief system you find interesting or you incline toward, I think these core ideas will help you universally across the board, okay? And then we're going to have a little time left, of course, to digest and open the heart and the mind to allow some practical experiential dimension to come into all of this blather that I'm going to be giving you this morning, okay? So why don't we start with Sri Aurobindo. Some of you know I've mentioned him before. Maybe in your own studies you've come across his teaching. A true spiritual genius. He passed away in 1950. Born in India, went to Cambridge to study. came back and he was really at the forefront of the uh, Indian Revolution to kick out the British, was the man, and actually was imprisoned for that for a year. And during his imprisonment, he had a nirvanic experience where he actually got to see beyond his own personal motivations and even the collective motivations of his political interests. There was a ground of being that was undiscovered, and it was pure and silent and true, and was at the real forefront of everything that is worth living for. And it utterly altered his orientation. And so he actually, when getting out of prison, went to live in Pondicherry in South India and began his own ashram and founded what's called integral yoga. And his teachings are really a blend of West and East. Like I said, he studied at Cambridge, he studied classics, he knew about 8 or 9 languages. He wrote 7 books at a time, and all of these books are just masterpieces. So just a powerhouse of spiritual energy and intellectual clarity. And this is a little pamphlet that is taken from his letters to his students. And it's here that he lays out some of these important ideas that we're going to be taking on our journey this morning. He starts by saying, the forces that stand in the way of spiritual practice are the forces of the lower mind, your vital energy, and your physical nature. And behind these are adverse powers of the mental, vital, and subtle physical worlds. These can be dealt with only after the mind and heart have become one-pointed and concentrated in one single aspiration to the divine. And so we get a lot here in a little bit of writing, and that is becoming one-pointed is a major step on this journey of yoga or spiritual unfoldment. One-pointedness means that you've gone beyond the ambivalence which precedes one-pointedness. Do I want to wake up, or do I want to be the ego? Do I want to be clear in who I am as the higher self, or do I want to stay unconscious as the lower self? That's where many, if not most of us, are right now. Like, we got the call. You wouldn't be sitting here at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning, I'm sorry. Even if you are tuning in at home with your coffee and your PJs, you got the call. And so there's something in you that's driving or pulling you towards a deeper life, a more sincere approach to who you really are and to live by higher principles. And yet still we find ourselves in this tug of war, this ambivalence of what do we really want and how much do we really want it. So that will go on for a little while. And as it says in A Course in Miracles, oftentimes that conflict, that internal conflict or tug of war, can become very acute, very sharp for a long time. And we find ourselves oftentimes thinking that, I got it, I got it, I got it, I don't got it, I don't got it, I don't got it. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That can go on for years or decades. And so it gets to a point where, like Sri Aurobindo said, like you make this inner resolve and you have this higher aspiration to finally say, I've had enough with living in the shadow. I've had enough of not really being at peace. I've tried it all so many different ways and in so many different times, and it never comes to satisfy. So I'm making my inner resolve, and that inner resolve or higher aspiration is what in yoga is called the ekagrata, the one-pointedness. And so that one-pointedness of, I want to go home. I want to stop feeding the pigs as the prodigal. I want to go home. And that journey home is what we're talking about. But it can only begin, since it's an internal journey, it's a journey within the mind. It can only begin when you allow the birth of this higher aspiration. It is literally a spiritual force that comes into your mind. And it won't be denied or overlooked because you'll feel that it's coming from beyond you, this aspiration. And it gives you a sense of you're not at home, but we got you. And let's go. We'll show you the way. You know, I had recited this song a couple weeks ago by Queensryche, Silent Lucidity. And it's such a beautiful song. I've loved it forever. And it recalls this idea that it's a round-trip journey in your head, that you're a master of illusion. And then it says, can you realize your dream's alive and you can be the guide, but we'll be watching over you. We're going to help to see you through. We'll protect you in the night, smiling next to you in silent lucidity. And so this idea of aspiration isn't just a concept, like I said, it's a spiritual force. It comes into the heart and it opens us up, it opens the heart to begin to sense this higher presence that has you, that guides you, that watches over you, that inspires and protects you. It's undeniable unless you deny it. See, your mind is like a radio station. And when we first start out on the journey, this ambivalence that we've been talking about between being the ego or the false self and desiring or aspiring to be the true self, we all have that in different ratios right now, sitting here. There are some who are really towards the side of the spectrum of, I'm done with this BS, I want to wake up. And there are others that are kind of towards this, I'm not sure, I'm kind of window shopping right now. And this is all interesting, but you know what? My ideas still trump anything he's saying. And so we have this spectrum or ratio between what radio station we are tuning into. And so this mind radio is what determines how clear this divine aspiration is to you. That's why A Course in Miracles is always saying throughout the teaching, ask yourself this question: what do I want and how much do I want it? Because he says, where your heart is, there your treasure is also. And what we treasure, we make real. So the ego will be just as real as your higher self in your mind if you treasure it. And if you are sold out and committed to listening to the ego rather than the higher aspiration, this higher voice of aspiration won't even show up on your mental radio. It will be sitting here, even if you're in this space, in this conversation with a curiosity, it will just be interesting. Conceptually stimulating, perhaps. So this is where, again, what we said about this onus of self-inquiry is very important for this round-trip journey in your head. In order to go home, you have to look deeply at yourself. Right? So Sri Aurobindo begins to say that when you look deeply at yourself, you begin to sort out the real from the unreal, the false from the true, the valuable from the valueless in your mind and in your life. What's blocking the transmission of your higher self? What's holding you back from going home? Well, when you discover what that is, you stop feeding it. Right? Remember that Native American, we probably all heard this 1,000 times, that Native American story. The little boy goes to his granddad, you know, what's the meaning of life? And the granddad says, there are two wolves in you. One good, one bad, and they're fighting for your mind. And the little boy says, well, which wolf is going to win? And the granddad says, the one you feed. So in rabbinic teaching, the sages of Israel say that we have a Yetzer HaTov and a Yetzer Hara. We have an impulse to good and we have an impulse to bad or wickedness. And it depends on what we are cultivating in our garden of the heart that determines what impulse predominates within the mind. If we are cultivating the tov, the good, the harmonious, the pleasant, then our heart becomes quiet, still, clear. And in this clarity, we become aware of the true nature of the mind. And this is where Aurobindo says is that next vital principle on this journey inward. And he makes this distinction between a silence that is good and a silence that is kind of numb. So just because we go into silence doesn't mean it's the silence that opens the heart to the divine mystery. The silence that we can oftentimes fall into is this numbness or obtuseness that's kind of just a blank silence. You're not really awake in the moment. You're kind of just tuning everything out and numbing out. And so he says, the important thing is to get rid of the habit of the invasion of troubling thoughts, wrong feelings, confusion of ideas, unhappy movements. These disturb the nature and cloud it and make it difficult for the higher force to work. When the mind is quiet and at peace, the force can work more easily. It should be possible to see things that have to be changed in you without being upset or depressed. Really important point. When we get quiet and our inner eye becomes clear and piercing and discerning, we will discover parts of ourselves that are lacking the authenticity or more in shadow than in light, more in fear than in love. So when we discover these parts of ourselves, oftentimes, and I hear this a lot from people who take the classes that we teach, they blame themselves. They get upset about themselves. They feel guilty. And there's nothing wrong with healthy guilt because that will stop you from repeating bad behavior and bad thinking. But when it becomes unhealthy guilt is when you don't change it and you just keep repeating the bad behavior, but you go through this whole I'm sorry ritual. What did I do? I can't believe I did that. That's neurotic guilt. It never changes anything. You just go through a ritual of pretending you're sorry, but you don't really change. What we're talking about here is when you do discover through this calm introspection that there are parts of the being that are out of phase or out of harmony with light and love and truth, you discover that without being upset or depressed about it. It's like, wow, thank God. I'm able to uncover this about myself. See, it's a reframing. Now, here's where it gets really fun. The people you're in love with and doing life with in your relationships are going to be doing that for you all the time. They are your mirror. And in often cases, they are showing you these undiscovered or blind spots within yourself. And you could get into the habit of, instead of getting depressed and upset, if they're pointing out something that's factual and true, have that wherewithal, that inner courage to say, you know what, this is actually for my betterment. This is so that I can actually grow. These are the parts of myself that are actually holding back joy and fulfillment from me. Right? Don't try to do this to somebody else. But if it's being done to you because you're on this journey, then receive it with gratitude. But if you go out thinking, oh, now that I'm doing this for myself, I'll share the love with you and tell you everything that's wrong with you. No, that's not the way it goes. That will just breed conflict, right? But this is where you get to experience it for you because you're making the choice to wake up. And therefore, as it says in the Yoga Sutras, once you make this choice, the entire universe conspires to give you the opportunities and the events and the people that are there to trigger you into awakening. Like this guy this morning. You brought him here. This is your doing. I'm your problem. Or I'm your blessing, depending on how you frame it. And then finally here from Sri Aurobindo. The difference between a vacant mind and a calm mind is this, that when the mind is vacant, there is no thought, no conception, no mental action of any kind, except an essential perception of things without the formed idea. So just blank. Just, I see chairs, I see green, I see lights, I see walls. Just perception, blank mind, right? Basic. Then he says, but in the calm mind, it is the substance of the mental being that is still. So still that nothing disturbs it. If thoughts or activities come, they do not rise at all out of the mind, but they come from outside and across the mind as a flight of birds crosses the sky in a windless air. So he then says, these thoughts, these actions, it passes, disturbs nothing, and leaves no trace. Right? The mind is completely calm. He goes on, he says, even if 1,000 images or the most violent events pass across it, the calm stillness remains, as if the very texture of the mind were a substance of eternal and indestructible peace. A mind that has achieved this calmness can begin to act even intensely and powerfully, but it will keep its fundamental stillness, originating nothing from itself, but receiving everything from above, capital A, and giving it what it receives from above. It gives that a mental form. So in other words, the Holy Spirit, or whatever you symbolize as the above, the divine energy, the divine light, comes into the quiet mind. And the mind will then serve its function in giving that impulse or that descent of grace a mental form. That's what the mind does. It's a manufacturing center of mental forms. But it doesn't add anything of its own. That's when all of the dust and the mud has settled, right? You've done your sorting out. You've quieted the mind. It's pure, it's calm, it's clear. And then the touches of God come in without distortion. And maybe you could even pick up what's being transmitted behind the words of Sri Aurobindo. There's a presence of, when you read his writings, it's undeniable that you can go into samadhi, into deep concentrated meditation by just reading his teachings, because he's speaking from what he's talking about. He's realized. So it gives it a mental form without adding anything of its own, calmly, dispassionately, though with the joy of the truth and the happy power and light that comes with the passing from the divine into the mind. It's a celebration of life. It's joyful to be in service to the divine. You get everything you want because the presence of the divine is love itself. Right? And that will be the major thing that we will be focusing on this morning, is these key principles all point towards love. That's the journey. The journey is the rediscovery and the acceptance of love, true love, God's love, which there is no other love, as we'll see, back into the heart. Right? We left that love. The idea of, that famous book, Return to Love. Well, it plays on words from A Course in Miracles. The Course says this, a return to love. You have to return, right? This whole motif of the journey home. Well, return implies you were there originally, but you left. Why would you have to return? The return implies it's your native home that you're going back to. You're not at home in the far country. So in order to return, you have to leave behind all that is not you, which means all that is not loving. This is the great paradox that we're saying here. A journey without distance to a place you've never left becomes increasingly clear when you realize that it is a return to love. And in the Kabbalah, in the Jewish teachings of the deeper message of the Torah, there's a principle there that says the law of the equivalence of form. So the idea behind that is, in the spiritual realm where we are, there's no space and time. So the separation that we feel from our source is not within distance. It's within quality of being. So the distance that we feel from the source and center of all, which is all-encompassing love, is because we harbor and treasure unloving thoughts, unloving feelings, grievances. All of these negative things that Sri Aurobindo was just saying have to be cleared out, or we won't be able to hear or feel the divine force. So this law of equivalence of form just means that as you become increasingly more loving and compassionate and open, you're journeying at light speed and beyond that back into the center of everything. That's how we journey home. We journey home, as Jesus says in the Course, by teaching only love, because that's what we are. Now, do you feel the tug of war? Do you feel that? Do you feel yourself zoning out, getting distracted, getting tuned out? Watch that. And it's so familiar to protect your ego. It literally comes in like when the light gets too bright and the message gets too clear, depending on where we are on that spectrum or that ratio of what we treasure, that ego will come in and grab you by the hand and start walking you off. And it will be sounding and thinking like you. Yeah, not really. Don't want that. Watch it without getting upset, without getting depressed. Just watch. You get to learn a lot about yourself in here. That's why so many don't come back. Time for a drink. All right, let's lighten it up with some Rumi. Jalaluddin. This one's called Deliverance from the Mathnawi, Book 3. Your anguish is seeking a way to attain to me. Yesterday evening, I heard your deep sighs, and I am able, without any delay, to give you access, to show you a way of passage, to deliver you from this whirlpool of time, that you might set your foot upon the treasure of union with me. But the sweetness and delights of the resting place are in proportion to the pain of the journey. Only then will you enjoy your native town and your kinsfolk, when you have suffered the anguish of exile. Right? Remember what we had started out by saying. We have to orientate ourselves. As Rumi has said elsewhere, if we are under the delusion of the ego, right, the lower mental that Sri Aurobindo's talking about, when we look at the world, we see some promise that we can find the satisfaction to our anguish in the world and in the bodies of the world. That is where we have to recognize we will never get on the path if our motivation is to continually seek outside of ourselves. The path begins when you realize that's a failed venture. And it often comes when you crash, and crash hard, and you feel the anguish. And there's nothing in the world and no one in the world that can actually reach that place where you're feeling your deep anguish. That's when you will attain to him, right? He says, your anguish is seeking a way to attain to me. That's also pregnant in the way it was written down. Even if you're not consciously aware of it, the fact that you're anguishing is sending up like a flare to God. It's like crying out in that inner place within yourself. I'm not at home. Please help me. Please help me. Right? Which leads back to the song from Queensryche. It actually goes into this beautiful point where a woman's voice says, help me. And then it begins again with the lyric, if you open your mind for me, you won't rely on open eyes to see. The walls you built within come tumbling down, and a new world will begin. Living twice at once, you'll learn you're safe from pain in the dream domain. Your soul is set free to fly, a round-trip journey in your head. Master of illusion, can you realize your dream's alive? You can be the guide, but I'll be watching over you. I will help to see you through. I will protect you in the night. I'm smiling next to you. So only when you have suffered the anguish of exile will you begin to even think about coming home. You'll realize you are in exile. You're not where you belong. And no sense pleasure, no worldly accolades, no material benefits are going to fix that. So just take a moment And just do a check-in to see where you're at. A personal inventory. Feel your feelings. How is this landing? What is it opening up in you? And again, without judgment, it could be beautiful and ecstatic, and it might not be so bright. It might be triggering, pissing you off. Right? Wasn't it Gloria Steinem that said that? The truth shall set you free, right after it pisses you off. Because part of being in exile is we want to be in control. We want to do it our way. And the anguish is we can't get it doing it our way. But we'll try harder. We'll keep doing it until the anguish becomes extreme and we give up. And we catch the scent. Whether one moves slowly or with speed, the one who is a seeker will be a finder. Always seek with your whole self, for the search is an excellent guide on the way, though you are lame and limping, though your figure is bent and clumsy, always creep towards the one. Make that one your quest. By speech and by silence and by fragrance, catch the scent of the King everywhere. And then finally here, draw near. Whatever it is you wish to marry, go, absorb yourself in that beloved. Assume its shape and qualities. If you wish for the light, prepare yourself to receive it. If you wish to be far from God, nourish your egoism and drive yourself away. If you wish to find a way out of this ruined prison, don't turn your head away from the beloved, but bow in worship and draw near. So who's going to win, Papa? The one you feed. Whatever you want to marry, whatever you love, you'll make real. See, that's a really important principle. You know, if you're familiar with the teachings of A Course in Miracles, he's saying the reason why we need teaching and don't know who we really are is because we really think choice exists. And because we think choice exists, we can choose between our ego or God's self. And as long as we believe that's real, we have choices to make. And so the realm of choice is called in the Course perception, where there is you choosing amongst the things that happen in the world. When it gets to the place where your choices have become so singular or one-pointed, it gets to the place that the Course calls the choiceless choice. And you are in union with God. Because your choice brought you into that marriage. But the nature and quality of perception is based on this principle that what you love and cherish will be real to you. Like a magician. You're a magician. Whatever you love and cherish, you make real. And once you've made it real within the inner planes of the mental being, you'll project it. And that will be your environment. That's why the Course and all of these esoteric teachings that are worth their salt claim the truth, and that is, no one is doing this to you. You're doing it to you. All that you encounter as the supposed otherness and outside world are your projections of what you treasure. Do you treasure attack? Do you treasure gossip? You will see attack and gossip driven towards you. It will come at you because that's you. Do you treasure love, kindness, forgiveness, peace, abundance? Behold, it's coming at you. Wherever you go, there you are. And so the nature of perception means that you're creating your reality by what you feed in you, by what you choose to make real. And you're choosing to make it real because you love it. Even sickness, even victimhood is there because on some level, there's payoff, there's juice, there's love. So remember then that you're getting what you want all the time in your life. And so the deep inquiry that we keep bringing up here this morning is, check out what you're getting. Do you want it? If not, begin to make these changes to your mind radio and begin to tune in to a different station so that when your mind is quiet, you can broadcast the love that you're looking for and see it out there in the world. And it will show up in form because that's what your mind does. It informs what you believe. Isn't that beautiful? That right here, right now, you can be done with your past as it's been showing up. Recognize who you are truly as the projector of your life and begin to quiet your mind, let all of this stuff settle, and begin to discern what you want and what you don't want so that you feed only what you want, and then that will show up. Now, the tricky part is that your life as you've lived it up till now will still be running. So what's informed right now is your past. So when you leave this church and you get back on the phone with your husband or your daughter or whatever, you're literally in your past. That's what you were getting from what you were believing in the past. So if you go by what your five senses are telling you and how your relationships look and form, you'll never make that shift and you'll never recreate your life. Because you'll keep getting what you always got if you fall prey to the hypnotic way that your life looks in the physical. The physical is the afterglow. It's the effect of what you're causing and choosing internally. So in those moments, even if you're in that clash with your daughter or your mate, you have that deeper knowledge, that introspection. Calm your mind and recognize, not going to go into the habit energy anymore. I'm going to end this right here, right now. I will bring another force into this dynamic that is loving, that is forgiving, that is taking responsibility. Maybe the daughter is screaming at you that you never take responsibility. You're not owning your mess, perhaps. And because you're the mother or you're the father, you don't have to own your mess, right? So pride has to go. Whatever it is that you're looking to reset, you have to look and change. Own it. You'll be guided in that moment how to do it. But then you inject something new, and that relationship can begin to take a different course. And you'll watch how everything is plastic and malleable in your life. You can do this with everything and everyone. Let's look a little bit into what the mother has to share. So this is taken from volume 6 of the Collected Works of the Mother. And just a little background here. She was a pioneer in many ways, a great physicist, a musician, an artist, rubbed shoulders with all the greats like Rodin and Picasso and etc. So she was, in a worldly sense, very established, high-born. She let all that go, came to the ashram, studied under Sri Aurobindo, and when he passed, she took over the operations of the ashram in South India. Living in South India at that time also was Maria Montessori, of Montessori school fame. And so the mother, in these 18 volumes of her collected works, is speaking primarily to children. And she was pioneering new ways of education. And Maria Montessori and Mira Alfassa, or the mother, were in correspondence quite a bit in those early days of the 20th century in ideas of education. And so this is where the mother is actually speaking to children, and yet profoundly so. This is what she says. If one wants to lead the spiritual life, one must not be 3/4 asleep. It is necessary to be wide awake and very attentive. Otherwise, you're like a little boat upon a river or a great sea with terrible currents. And if you're not alert, if you do not pay close heed to these currents, if you relax your vigilance, all of a sudden you find that you are at the other end from where you wanted to go. You are carried away just like that, quite naturally. Why, yes, I wanted to go there, and I find myself here. That's how it is. In ordinary life, this happens all the time. Only, in ordinary life, one says, it is circumstances, it is fate, it's my bad luck, it's their fault, or else I have no luck. That is very, very convenient. One veils everything and expects, yes, one has happy moments and then bad ones, and finally, finally one falls into a hole, for everybody tumbles over and expects to sooner or later. So one does not worry, or worries all the time, which comes to the same thing. That is, one is unconscious. One lives unconsciously and puts all the blame for what happens on others and on the circumstances, but never tells oneself, why, it is my own fault. It needs a sufficiently vast consciousness to begin. Even among those who profess to be conscious, there are not many who see clearly enough to become aware that all that happens to them comes from what they are and from nothing else. They always say, he is wrong. Circumstances are unfavorable. Oh, why was that done? If you were not what you are, it would not happen in this way. It would happen differently. How convenient. So in a way, it's very confronting. It's icky to have to look into these underbellies of what we were trying to avoid looking at in ourselves. But once you look and you have that inner courage to go on this journey, and as Carl Jung had said, the first thing you're going to confront is your shadow. When you begin to face and integrate your shadow and realize that it's actually helping you become conscious and open to your vast potential, then you'll become less and less disturbed and upset by the shadow material, and you'll be able to shine it away with the right approach and the right framing. But as long as we throw the blame out there and we feel a victim or an effect to whatever seems to be going on outside of ourselves, we remain paralyzed on the path. So if you don't take anything with you today except this, you are doing it all to yourself. No matter what form it's taking in your life, no matter who you think is doing you wrong, no matter what circumstances appear to be against you, they are there because you want them there. That's what this teaching is saying. Confront why you want them there, what the payoff is, who you get to be because of that, and you'll begin to discover your magical power and how you can reorder your life. I don't know if anybody else is a nerd and remembers that movie, The Matrix. Morpheus tells Neo there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. Big difference. So in our final few minutes here this morning, this is taken from a workbook lesson in the course, There is no love but God's. There is no love but God's. I can't get into all of this. It's very profound to contemplate what he says here, and I'll only give you a snippet before we go into the exercise or the practice. But he says this in the opening paragraph. Perhaps you think that different kinds of love are possible. Perhaps you think there is a kind of love for this, a kind of love for that, a way of loving one, another way of loving still another. Love is one. It has no separate parts and no degrees, no kinds nor levels, no divergencies and no distinctions. It is like itself, unchanged throughout. It never alters with a person or a circumstance. It is the heart of God, and therefore your heart. Love's meaning is obscure to anyone who thinks that love can change. He does not see that changing love must be impossible, and thus he thinks that he can love at times and hate at other times. He also thinks that love can be bestowed on one and yet remain itself, although it is withheld from others. To believe these things of love is not to understand it, and therefore be far from it and having to journey home. If it could make such distinctions, love would have to judge between the righteous and the sinner and perceive the true self in separate parts. There is no love but God's, and all love is His. There is no other principle which rules where love is not. Love is a law without opposite. Its wholeness is the power holding everything as one. So this idea of journeying can also be referred to as an escape, right? An escape from the whirlpool of time, as Rumi had said. So this is what Jesus says, the world, or the whirlpool of time, that seems to hold you prisoner can be escaped at by anyone who does not hold it dear. Right? What you love, you make manifest. Love not the world. If you love the world, the love of God is not in you. You just won't know it because you've turned your affection to marry something else. The prophets had a lot of ribald imagery to play on that, calling the mind that turns to love something other than God a prostitute. Jeremiah is loaded with that imagery. Okay, so this is going to be a practice so you can get into more of a meditative pose. Allow your mind to settle and allow your awareness to melt into the current of your breath. And as it says in the higher teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, as you begin to relax your mind into the current of your breath, allow your awareness to merge with space. Feel the space within and around you merging with your awareness. Open to your vastness. And whatever's arising, see it as empty space and watch it dissolve and disintegrate back into the field where your awareness and empty space are indestructible. The instruction for our meditation this morning is think of one who makes this journey with you. And who came to learn what you must learn. And as he or she comes to mind, give them this message from this higher self that you are being right now. I bless you with the love of God, which I would share with you. For I would learn the joyous lesson that there is no love but God's and yours and mine and everyone's. And feel that quiet, expansive mind, that open and receptive heart within yourself and within the partner that you are on the journey with, that you just spoke with. And feel that union engendered by sharing the truth of this universal love with them. That in this acknowledgement, there can be no separation from you and this person, from you and God, from you and everyone. Here is the return. Here is the journey home to the center of the heart, the place we never left, and where everyone is joined with us and the source of love that created us. And so it is. Remember the words of Sri Aurobindo, you can act powerfully from this quiet mind. So as the blue bag goes around, powerfully give to the church, which thanks you. And if you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, you can also give your love by clicking on the link below and donating to the 8 a.m. service. We are very grateful for that. Thank you. If anybody has any words that they would like to share with us this morning, Joe has a cordless mic, so you can too be a star. Stephanie.
I just have a question. It sounds like Paramahansa Yogananda and Sri Aurobindo might have been contemporaries.
They were contemporaries.
Did they know each other?
There's never been mention of Sri Aurobindo and Paramahamsa Yogananda corresponding or any of that. There is with Sri Ramana and Yogananda, but not with Aurobindo. But good question. We are blessing this offering with love, joy, and peace, knowing that it will go into the form of the world to bring about light and liberation to all minds. So it is. Amen.
We miss you, Lisa.
Indeed. Anybody else? Any feedback before we depart? Oh, good. It was a good blather. Excellent. Thank you. All right, let's rise and seal the deal. Resting within the thundering silence of the heart space. And just allowing what was spoken and transmitted here, visibly and invisibly, to continue to reign within the heart and water these seeds of divine potential that you carry with you always. May they come to fruition quickly. May they be sprouting on good ground, and may they produce 1,000-fold in your life and fill it with joy and celebration. And then we will know that the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you. Course in Miracles tomorrow night, 7:15 p.m.